All right, I honestly think this might be one of my favorite builds in the entirety of Destiny 2. This has to be the most Titan build I have ever seen in the whole 9 years of me playing this franchise. This build is about buffing your melee damage just up to absurd amounts on top of just being completely unkillable. And the cherry on top of all of that is the fact that Monte Carlo has a catalyst now, and you can just melee people with your weapon. You don't even have to shoot anymore. Just melee everything and you pretty much win all the time. I am very excited to jump into this build for you all, but really quick, I do want to say thank you all so much for all the most recent support on the channel. You all have been absolutely amazing with showing all your continued support, and I truly appreciate it so much. With that being said, if you do find yourself coming back and enjoying my content, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It really does help support the channel out in so many ways, and I truly appreciate it. All right, to start off, I think we should begin talking about our melee damage and then go to our survivability, because one of our aspects will actually help out with both of those. But the exotic we're going to be running is the Syntheseps, which has the exotic perk Biotic Enhancements. Increases melee lunge range, improved melee and super damage when you're surrounded. So the melee lunge range provided with this exotic is nice to help secure your melee kills, but the main thing is going to be that melee and super damage increase. With Syntheseps, if you're surrounded, your melee will be increased by 200% and your super will be increased by 50%. Syntheseps are one of the strongest Titan exotics in the game, and you see them running pretty much every single melee build, because not only do they just make it easier to secure those one-shot kills, it also does have the other benefit of buffing your super damage, which is also nice, and your super will play a large part into this build. But next up, let's take a look at Monte Carlo, since this is another integral part of the build. So the way this is going to work, when you deal damage, you regenerate melee energy over time, and when you get kills, you will randomly refill it to max from time to time. It also has the ability to stack damage up to 5 times, and if you get a melee kill, it will immediately put that 2 times 5 alongside also refilling your magazine. The really cool part now is that you can use the giant bayonet on the weapon. It reads, at 5 stacks of Markov chain, press your reload button to switch between your melee attack and Monte Carlo's bayonet. Landing a bayonet melee hits grants melee energy. So if you do end up using the bayonet on Monte Carlo, you're going to get a whopping 1,540% increased damage to red bar enemies. Obviously that's a big number, but they are against red bars. Pretty much anything will kill them. But the main thing is that you're going to get a 560% increase to mini bosses and higher. This is a very large increase, and that will stack with Syntheseps and everything else that we'll get into later. Another important thing to note is that if you do get a bayonet kill, that will give you times 5 Markov chain to immediately reload another bayonet stab, and you can pretty much stab everybody with this weapon if you want to. And since weapon kills also give Markov chain, that means if you are at times 5 stacks, you can just get a weapon kill to reproc the times 5, so you can take that bayonet a little further if there is a larger enemy away. With Syntheseps and the Monte Carlo glaive alone, you can pretty much one-shot almost anything in the game, and then even on higher content on things like champions, you can pretty much get them down to half health with just 1 stab. Now another way we're going to buff this build is with our brand new aspect, Banner of War. So this reads, defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of the pulses. So since this whole build is about melee and everything, you're always going to have this proc, and like it read, if you or your allies get kills when you do proc this, you can fill this up to times 4 stacks, and it pulses very rapidly and will heal you every single time it pulses. This is extremely strong for your survivability, and it will even help your teammates out. Imagine on things like Crota's Inn, running from totem to totem, you just have your entire team in this ore healing over and over again, and it kind of is a miniature mobile healing rift. On top of the healing, it will also grant you an additional 40% increase to your melee damage, which again will stack with everything we've already went over, and it will just let you kill absolutely everything in the game without ever having to shoot a weapon. Banner of War is honestly extremely fun, one of the most fun aspects in the game in my opinion, and all it takes is getting a melee kill, which is what this build is suited for anyway. Even if you want to run this without a melee build, you can just get a finisher to also proc it, or even a sword kill, and it is extremely easy to keep up, and the benefits you get are just absurd. So that's pretty much all the ways we're going to be buffing our melee damage, but again, this will help out with our survivability a ton, but more ways we're going to do that is with our aspect Into the Fray. So destroying a tangle or casting your super grants Woven Mail for nearby allies. While you have Woven Mail, your melee regeneration rate is increased. So right off the bat, popping your super is giving yourself and your teammates Woven Mail for survivability, which is very strong. On top of that, destroying a tangle will do the same thing. Woven Mail is going to be a 55% damage reduction, which is just absurd, especially when you pair that with Banner of War's healing, and then you just have this absurd amount of damage reduction alongside also constant healing, and you just cannot die. This really does help out with the melee playstyle since you need to be into the fray, as the aspect would say, and now you can just confidently swing away to everything without even having to worry about death. Now the other part of this aspect is when you have Woven Mail, you will also get increased melee regeneration rate. This is also extremely strong because you're going to have Woven Mail at all times, and obviously using Monte Carlo also regenerates your melee, so you're going to be able to get your actual melee cooldown back extremely fast, and your actual melee with this build is also very, very strong. On the topic of cooldown though, I did forget to mention that when you get a bayonet kill with the Monte Carlo Catalyst, you will actually refill half of your melee energy as well. So once again, between Monte Carlo and also the ability to constantly regenerate it with Into the Fray, that means your melee strike, Frenzy Blade, is going to be up pretty much at all times, and this is also very strong. So the way this is going to work, you basically have 3 charges of your melee, and you can dash forward to an enemy. You will also sever an enemy, which recently also got buffed, and when you sever an enemy, the enemy that you sever will do 40% reduced damage. So now you have to imagine an enemy that you are meleeing is dealing 40% reduced damage while you are taking 55% reduced damage and healing all the time. You can kind of start to see how you're pretty much unkillable with this melee build. Frenzy Blade is extremely nice to use on something like a champion or even a boss because you can do 3 rapid strikes back to back, and once again you are going to be able to keep these up pretty much at all times with Into the Fray and Monte Carlo. Now another way you can actually buff Frenzy Blade is running a 1-2 punch shotgun. This is when you land all the pellets, you will just get a little bit of increased melee damage, and that will work very nicely again on things like a champion. You could just shoot with the shotgun and then swing back to back and pretty much insta-kill them with your Frenzy Blade. But since we're on the topic of swinging back to back, let's look at Blade Fury, which is also going to be extremely strong for this. So basically what this is just you can activate Frenzy Blade multiple times, but you also have the ability to suspend enemies. Blade Fury is not only a very, very strong ad clear super, but with this setup, with the super damage increase you're getting from Synthesubs, you can also absolutely destroy bosses with this. Now obviously if it's a floating boss or a boss that moves around a lot, you're not going to get as much benefit out of this, but if it is a boss that's on the ground standing still, Blade Fury with Synthesubs proc can absolutely destroy them. And another fun thing to note is that it also severs every time you hit. So again, 40% damage reduction, Woven Mail, super damage reduction, you're just unkillable. But let's jump into Fragments and let's look at some other ways we're going to round out this build. So starting off, we're going to run Threat of Fury. So damaging targets with a Tangle grants melee energy. This is very nice because you're going to be making tangles everywhere with this build. This just means now when you pick it up and throw it, you get a bunch of melee energy. You do always want to pick this up and throw it at enemies because it does net you a lot more increase than if you was just to shoot it and blow it up. So if you see tangles, always be sure to pick them up and throw them around. Another fun thing to note is since you can destroy tangles to proc Into the Fray, you can also throw these on your teammates to give them Woven Mail alongside also healing them with Banner of War. So if there is like a group of enemies and teammates, you're going to get the most bang for your buck because you will give them Woven Mail alongside giving yourself melee energy. Now next up, we're going to be running Threat of Warding. So picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. We've already talked a lot about Woven Mail, but this is going to work the exact same way as Into the Fray. But this is just nice because since they're going to be orbs everywhere, you're going to be able to easily keep Woven Mail up 24/7. You have your super, your tangles, and now even orbs granting this 55% damage reduction. And again, as I've said like 8 times in this video, you just become unkillable. Now next up, we are going to be running Threat of Transmutation. So while you have Woven Mail, Weapon Final Blows create a tangle. Since you're not really running a strand weapon with this build and you're mainly going to be running Monte Carlo, I thought this would be a great addition since you're going to have Woven Mail up at all times. So now your Monte Carlo can just make tangles as well. Tangles are another integral part of this build, so you want to be able to make them a good amount, and this fragment helps that a lot. And then finally, we're going to be running Threat of Generation. So dealing damage generates grenade energy. And you might be asking yourself, Russ, why are we running Threat of Generation if this is a melee focused build? Well, mainly because I'm going to be running the grab grenade. Now, I will go on and say, if you want to run Suspend, this will be better for in-game content because it deals with a lot more champions. But if you want to be a Giga Chad, you definitely want to run the grapple and just grapple melee into everything. With the amount of melee ability regen you already have anyway, this is now just going to give you a bunch of grenade regeneration, and you can use your grapple almost the same amount of time as your melee. Just using it to get into a group of enemies, punching them, and then just going to town with the Monte Carlo Catalyst or even just your Frenzy Blade in general. It is extremely fun. You can obviously even use it to get out of situations if you need to, but let's be honest, you don't really ever have those situations. And then one final final thing to note for your weapons, you can run a sword since Banner of War will actually give you a 10% increase to damage on your swords, but that's not the craziest thing. You can absolutely run whatever else you want to in any DPS scenario. Obviously, if you want to run a rocket, that is also still going to be extremely strong, and then you could just use your other part of the build to do melee damage. And again, you could even use that super for boss damage as well, because it can do some crazy things. But now let's take a look at our stats. And first off, we're obviously going to be running 100 resilience. Damage reduction is important in every build. It's probably the most important in this build since you're trying to melee everything. So 30% damage reduction on top of everything else we've already talked about, extremely good. I would highly recommend running 100 discipline if you do want to play into that grapple melee playstyle. This just makes it more fun for me. You can just jump in there and melee everything. And again, you could also run suspend grenade for end game content so you can stun those champions. Now, you can also opt in to run pretty much anything else. I do like to run strength just to help out further getting those frenzy blades. You're already going to be getting a lot with Monte Carlo and Into the Fray again, but this will just further help out with that, and you can just keep those melees up at all times. But I would highly recommend 100 resilience. Then 100 discipline is what I personally enjoy because I love grappling around everywhere. But let's start off taking a look at our artifact, and these help out a good amount with this build. To start off, we do have Elemental Fury, so while stunned, champions take bonus damage from your abilities and Elemental Orb damage. This is nice because if you do stun a champion, that means your Frenzy Blade ability will do a lot more damage, so you could just easily kill those champions. This is one I would highly recommend taking if you are going to be playing heavily into that melee. Now, next up, we have Communal Pickup. So when an ally destroys or picks up your Tangle or Elemental Orb, the Tangle cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds, and you gain bonus damage with weapons matched to your subclass for 10 seconds. So the second part of this doesn't really matter too much since we're not running a strand weapon, but the main thing is if someone ends up picking your Tangle up or shooting it, it means your cooldown is getting reduced by 5 seconds, just so you can make more Tangles so you can have more energy or give more Woven Mail more often. Now, next up, we have Refreshing Pickup. So picking up a Tangle or Elemental Orb grants energy to your least powered ability. Since we're going to be picking these up anyway, you might as well just take this to get some energy for things like your class abilities, so you can spam that a little bit more often. Your melees also has 3 charges, so you're going to be recharging that a lot when you pick these up. And again, even that grapple, you just grapple in and melee everything. Next up, we do have Elemental Munitions. So combatant final blows with Tangles or Elemental Orbs have a chance to drop special or heavy ammo. This is extremely strong. This does proc a lot more than you would think, and since you're picking up Tangles trying to get kills with it anyway to get that melee energy back, you're just going to make some ammo now. That's very nice. And finally, we have Frenzied Stacks. Your armor charge grants bonus damage to your thrown Tangles or Elemental Orbs. Your armor charge now decays over time. So this is nice because now when you have armor charge, now those Tangles are going to be doing more damage to secure kills, to proc things like Elemental Munitions, so you can spawn more ammo and also just kill more things, which is nice. That's always fun. Well, that's pretty much it for the artifact. Let's jump over into our armor mods, and if you all would like to see an in-depth infographic of this build, be sure to head over to Mobalytics. I will link everything down below, and you can read along over there while I go over everything in the video. But all right, let's start off with our helmet. And first off, we're going to be taking a kinetic siphon. So rapid kinetic weapon final blows, creating orb of power. This is a build based heavily around melee, but you can also still get kills with your Monte Carlo. And this just means now you're going to spawn an orb of power to proc armor charge for your artifact perks and also Woven Melt. And we're also going to be running hands-on, so gain bonus super damage on melee kills. This is pretty much a no-brainer. We're going to be getting a ton of melee kills from our grapple melee to our frenzy stacks. We're now going to get even more super energy, and again, our super is going to be really strong with the synthesups. And next up, we have a heavy ammo finder, so increases the drop chance of heavy ammo on kill. This is nice because again, more ammo is always nice. If you are running a sword, you can just try to keep as much sword ammo up as possible. And on top of that, since Monte Carlo is an exotic weapon, this does have a higher chance to drop the heavy ammo breaks. And next up for our gauntlets, we're going to be running a kinetic loader, so increases the reload speed of kinetic weapons. This is one you could swap out for something else if you want to. I already find the flow of this build already being extremely strong without having an extra mod right here. So I just like to take this if I ever do have to reload my Monte Carlo. It could just be a little bit faster. But again, if you don't mind the slower reload or you don't really find yourself reloading, opt in to take pretty much anything else right here. This is just what I prefer. Now, next up, we have a heavy-handed. So your power melee final blows create orbs of power. Again, pretty much a no-brainer. You're going to be getting melee kills all the time. This will also work with the grapple melee. So this just means you're making orbs with your gun, your melee, and even your grenade now, which is really cool. Again, orbs help out Woven Mail, armor charge, all that good stuff. Then next up, we have impact induction. So causing damage with a melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. Just like heavy-handed, this will actually also work with grapple melee. So now your 3 melee charges alongside your grapple melee is constantly feeding your grenade cooldown back, With Threat of Generation, this just means you can spam that grapple melee a lot more often. Now for your chest piece, always go with triple resistant mods. This is pretty much standard for every build, but of course, way more important with this one because you want to be melee enemies being up close as much as you can be. Now for my boots, I do like to run 1 recuperation, so replenishes health each time you pick up an orb of power. This is going to be good for your survivability. Bane of War is already healing you, but now just when you make orbs, which you're obviously going to be doing all the time, and also your teammates as well, you can just replenish some health alongside proc that Woven Mail, and it just again makes you extremely unkillable. If you want to run something else, if you think you already have enough survivability, feel free to opt into anything else. You could take 3 surge mods if you want to, because my next one's going to be kinetic weapon surge. So your kinetic weapons gains a small bonus to damage while you have an armor charge. Your armor charge now decays over time. This is nice because now, since I'm getting Tonsov, Markarov Chain to do more damage in Monte Carlo, I'll now also proc kinetic weapon surge, and Monte Carlo will just absolutely shred red bar since it does get that 40% damage increase, and you can act clear with it alongside also dealing that insane melee damage with the bayonet. Again, if you want to opt in to take something else elemental for your power weapon for any DPS scenario, feel free to opt into it. These are very, very flexible. This is just what I like to run like on a day-to-day basis, I would say. But if I'm going into a boss scenario, obviously you're probably going to run triple surge mods with whatever heavy weapon you're using, matching that element. Now, finally for our class mod, I do like to run 1 bomber, so reduce the grenade cooldown when using your class ability. I figured I would throw this in here, so if I ever need to get a grapple melee off, I can just pop a class ability just to fully recharge it. This is not really that needed. You could absolutely run something else, maybe something like a powerful attraction if you just want to pick some orbs up, but you want to save your armor charge for your artifact perk for your tingles to do more damage and your kinetic weapon surges. So I wouldn't recommend anything that's going to consume your armor charge with these down here. Maybe things like a power finisher would be pretty good. Since finishers will also proc Banner of War, you will now also get an armor charge. But next up, I have a proximity ward. So gaining powerful overshield while performing your finisher. Again, kind of like the other ones. Nothing really matters too much down here, but this is nice because if you are in the fight and your melee doesn't fully kill a champion, you can then just get a finisher, and now you're gonna have a very protective overshield alongside Woven Mail, alongside constant healing. And again, kind of plays in that aspect of just being completely unkillable. And finally, I have a time dilation, so your decay and armor charge has a longer duration. This is nice for your kinetic weapon surges and even the artifact perk to increase the tingle damage. This now you can just keep up that damage boost for a lot longer. And if you want to just double down on time dilation, you can obviously do that to have more time, but I do like having the benefit of that overshield with proximity ward just to be a little extra safe. But that is pretty much the build. All you really want to do is make sure you're constantly in the fight. This is a very aggressive build. If you are a passive player, I would highly not recommend this. This is if you want a W key, be confident in your melee abilities being extremely strong. Also, that super being extremely strong, you're going to have insane amount of damage reduction and insane amount of melee damage increase, and you can stab people with Monte Carlo now, which is just very, very fun. On top of all the aggression, you're even a pretty good support player while providing your teammates Woven Mail and a constant healing buff with Banner of War, and you can pretty much just take all the benefits that you're getting and also supply them to your teammates. And this is a very fun build. It is one of the strongest Titan builds in my opinion right now, and it's something I would highly recommend every Titan set up on their character if you really want to live out that true Titan fantasy. But like I do at the end of all these videos, if you were curious about my transmog, this is what I opted in to run. I tried to make a strand focused, look with like, maybe like lines and stuff, or weaves, whatever you want to call it, just going down the Titan. I think it looks pretty cool. He definitely looks like a W key warrior in my opinion. And if you want to make your Titan look like this, just be sure to copy this down. But all right, I think that is going to do it all for me. Let me know what you all think about this build in the comments below. Have you been running something like this? Are you excited we can finally use the bayonet on the Monte Carlo? I know I am. This build was a ton of fun to put together, and this is pretty much what I'm going to primarily run on my Titan nowadays. And if you love a very fun, aggressive playstyle while also keeping your teammates alive, this is one I would highly recommend you all try out. Anyways though, I really hope you all enjoyed. I wish you all the best of luck with putting this build together, but thank you all so much for watching this one, and have a great day. Peace.